Hello. Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Give folks another minute. This is where we tell a funny microservices joke. Something about why the microservice go to therapy. Do you know this one?
I do not, but I'm curious to
Oh,
know what
it's.
the answer
I don't.
is.
I feel like I should have rehearsed this punchline ahead of time. Something about like it was immature around its dependencies. There's some joke like that. Okay, for another time. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to Service Ownership Simplified, tech talk from us here at Ops Level. So, what we're going to do today, housekeeping. I'll get to that in just a second. I'll have Ty and myself will introduce ourselves. We're going to go over a whole bunch of other things, all around the topic of ownership as well. And the big item at the end is the demo of ownership features in Ops Level itself. So, let's get into it. First, housekeeping, right, as we just said. Two housekeeping notes. One, we are going to share a recording of this with anyone who registered. So if you miss it, you have to duck out early, whatever it might be, you will still have access to the content. Second is if you do have questions, thoughts, feelings, please do save them for the end. We're going to keep this recording section relatively clean. And then at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions or thoughts or discussion if folks do have anything they want to ask. Anything that I'm missing in terms of housekeeping? If not, we'll hop right in.
Good to go.
Okay, cool. So, by way of starting, introduction. So, my name is Ezra. I am the lead customer success manager here at Ops Level. I have worked with, I think now almost 60 some odd Ops Level customers building and deploying their internal developer portals. These customers range in size from 20 odd developers and 20 odd microservices to 2,500 plus developers and 4,000 plus microservices. And they buy and use our tool in part. We'll talk about this more later. And they're to help them drive their ownership stories, to help them understand what it means to them to build and ship software and improve their developer experiences. And they also live within a range of where they are on their sort of DevOps journeys. Some are still in a monolith and working on decoupling and distributing ownership. Others have been doing it for years and just looking for better technology to help them. And what I'm going to share in my section of the presentation today are some of the things we've learned from our customers over the years that I've been doing this. Ty?
Yeah, and then I'm Ty. So my role is a solutions consultant, primarily on the pre-sale side. So I talk with a lot of companies that are considering buying Ops Level. What are some of the problems that they're looking to solve, and how can they use Ops Level to solve those problems? And ownership is definitely one of those problems that we have a lot of discussions about. So that's what I'll be demoing today.
Awesome. Okay, so I think then we can hop right in. So to start with sort of the problem statement here, modern software is complex. I'm assuming if you've opted into a tech talk around ownership, you either have or are aspiring to a modern way of building and shipping software, right? You are working on distributed systems, you have small teams, those teams are building and owning things, or you aspire to them owning things themselves, right? Maybe you use a microservice architecture, maybe you like service architecture because micro is too specific. Whatever it is, it's complicated. It has a lot of moving pieces, right? Gone are the days of team A builds something, team B tests something, team C deploys something, and we do this whole process like twice a year, right? Those days are gone. This chart is Uber's production infrastructure from their own talk in SRECon, but it gives you an idea, right, of what this sometimes looks like in terms of how complex these things are. So again, the old way was a developer is building a feature, right, for a particular business problem, ideally, right? They received a ticket, they're working that ticket to solve this particular problem and build code to solve that particular thing. The joy of modern software development is we expect software developers to do other things, right? There are more technologies, more responsibilities, more work that has been pushed from dedicated ops teams, right, to dev teams. It's a lot of stuff, and it seems like more stuff is added to it all the time. So this complexity, the fact that developers have to do more stuff and work within a more complicated architecture and a more complicated environment, causes issues for developers and your business, right? So it means that developers spend less time developing the features that actually help your customers and your business, and it makes it harder to do the work of software development. Um, right? The business and software is at risk because things are missing, right? There's more downtime, there's less data, there's security, there's release cycles, right? It is harder to do the operational parts of the job and harder to do the development parts of the job. So it is a good instinct, right? The old model was worse, but the new model itself also has downsides to it, has costs to it. And what we're going to talk about today is how an internal developer portal and the culture of ownership that supports or and vice versa, can actually help you mitigate a lot of these challenges, right? Some of the statistics from our own research here is 3,000 plus hours of a year spent searching for service information, just trying to figure out what exists and what it does. And $300,000, right, is the cost of all that time of your developers should be building features, and instead they're looking for information. So the question we're gonna answer in the next 15 or so minutes, maybe less, is, or the rest of this session, but my section specifically, is how can you improve the developer experience of owning software without putting your business at risk? How do you mitigate the downside of that complexity, um, with and ensuring that your developers like coming to work every day? They could spend their time building things that actually help your business and not frustrated trying to figure out how to do their jobs. So we'll start with, what does ownership mean? And it's funny that in the context of, we have a whole tech talk about ownership, right? What a clear definition. But there is a high level understanding of what ownership means, which is, I build this software, I wrote this code, I build this feature, I am responsible for it. Easy. What that looks like, we found, is pretty variable, even within our own customer base, right? So some teams are responsible for going on call, right? If it breaks, you fix it. Sometimes they're responsible for ongoing maintenance, like language and tooling updates. Sometimes they're responsible for production readiness. Ty is going to demo that feature in ops level, but there are all sorts of requirements that services have to go through or repos have to go through before they're ready to say, this is the minimum standard for production ready code at our business. Infrastructure, performance, right? This is going to be driven by your needs and your culture, right? The size of your org, the way your org is structured, and it's a journey. Often our customers start with, first we're going to make sure you're in trust of production readiness. In the next 6 months, we're going to rolling out on call, right? So this is not necessarily a all at once, all of a sudden we do all this work. But we've seen that there is a variability here, both over time and within our customers, around what exactly does ownership mean. Frankly, we don't really care what it means. I don't have a particular dog in this fight around, like, it should definitely mean this, this, and this, as long as there is a clear definition. Say at our, when you're onboarding a new developer, you can say to them, our team owns these things. Ownership means that we are responsible for X, Y, Z/Z. So to get into it, typically, as I said down here, right, companies don't introduce this ownership culture or change the way they think about ownership just for fun, right? This isn't like some CTO wakes up someday and decides we need to reorg the entire development organization. There's a goal, right? And the business outcomes you're looking to drive should define how you build your tooling and how you structure the ownership in your organization. So I have a couple of examples up here: deploy velocity, MTTR, incidents, right? We're trying to decrease incidents, so we're going to make sure teams who write the code will not write such terrible code if they know they're going to be responsible when an incident happens. Or, this is a real quote from a real customer, we're going to get better reliability this quarter, or heads will roll. I will say that was a very fast deployment of our software, But it's the general idea of we need to drive these outcomes for our business. And so we're going to build a architectural model and an ownership model that helps us track to those outcomes. So we want to ensure deploy velocity is X. Well, what tooling can we build to help teams deploy faster? How can we empower teams to do this work or make these choices all on their own? That said, while you do want to empower teams, there is certainly such a thing as too much freedom or too much ownership, right? So at some of our customers and some companies, teams have wide discretion. Through tooling, languages, infrastructure, deployment pattern, design pattern, roadmap, they are let loose to make whatever choices they want that they think best benefit themselves and their business and whatever KPIs they're trying to achieve. That is rare and has drawbacks as well, right? Developers, in my experience, do not always make the best choices for your organization, right? They often make the best choices for their team. Sometimes they'll find a really elegant solution to a problem that, though it is elegant and efficient and really is beautiful code they're going to write, doesn't actually scale well into enterprise architecture. It's opaque, it's complex, it's hard to work through. It involves you maintaining a language and a series of critical vulnerabilities that you don't otherwise need to track, right? There's something that's too much freedom. And what our customers tend to do, and what we recommend, is figuring out where you want to put the on the spectrum from we give our teams complete autonomy to these are the very strict specific set of rules we follow. Typically people land somewhere in the middle. If you want to build software at our company, you have these choices, right? These are the things you're allowed to use, these are things you're not allowed to use. If you'd like to use something different, come talk to us and make the case, and we can see if we can support it. But there's some level of restriction. And that's to make sure that there's actually the ability to help these things in the background. So, that all being said, part of the reason why you do want to restrict those choices, part of the reason you do want to make sure people are working is because you want to have a platform, and I'm going to use the word platform here to mean all sorts of teams and groups, right? Anyone whose customer is the developer and not the actual customer themselves, right? Your business's customer, they should have the responsibility of ensuring that on-call and incidents and upgrades and production readiness are done, but that doesn't mean they have to do all the work all by themselves. And the metaphor I like to use with customers a lot is IKEA furniture. Um, I've never lived in a world without IKEA furniture. Maybe there was a bad old days before it, but the idea with IKEA furniture is you have to assemble it yourself, but you get help. And you get help in the form of tooling, right? This little guy up here with his tools. You get instructions, right? You have a clear idea about what you're supposed to do, when, and how. And you have a team that's going to both produce those instructions and those tools and who are available to help you, right? I blocked over the little IKEA logo here, right? There's a platform team who is there to help you do this. This is, I'm assuming, who you are, person watching this tech talk, right? It's also who our customers tend to be. The teams who really care about creating a model for what the tools should be, what the instructions are, and how they can best help their development teams own and run their software. So, this change, moving towards ownership, moving further towards ownership, is hard. It is hard because it is two distinct things that are happening at once. The new ways of thinking about your job, right? Developers who are used to doing things one way have to do things differently. That's hard. It is hard to go from thinking you are an X to thinking you are an X and a Y and a Z. And if that's not hard enough on its own, there are also new tasks, right? I'm an excellent developer in Ruby, but now I have to learn Kubernetes. That is a hard new thing to do, and that is a challenging thing for an organization to do, especially with senior folks, especially folks who are doing things in one way for a very long time. The way to solve these challenges are going to be specific to your org, right? Some new startups have, like, for example, our own startup, Ops Level. We knew this was our destination from the day my boss's bosses started coding, right? We knew this was a thing we were going to do, is get to a culture of ownership. So this is comparatively easy. For other companies, this is harder, right? They have to make this a real change and a real shift. That said, I can speak to what we've seen work at other places. So, in terms of new ways of thinking about the job, we've seen a pattern of teach, practice, rollout. Rather than saying, as of 2 weeks from now, we're going to do this new thing called ownership, good luck. Instead, there is a introductory period. Let's tell people what we're going to do. We're going to, instead of having you own every part of the monolith or every service completely end to end, you're going to get a sample set, right? Your tier one services. You're going to go look at some other team services. You're going to have a chance to try this out before you have to like put this into production and do this as part of your day job. And then finally, there's a graduated rollout, right, with help and support. There also, we've seen generally, are some sort of carrot and stick. I like the metaphor of you celebrate the adopters, you help the stragglers, correct the resistors. I put this in italics because the original version of this quote I heard from an old boss um, used a much more martial metaphor about going on a march where you celebrate the ones who run ahead, help the ones who have fallen behind, and shoot the ones who resist. But feels a little too martial for this tech talk. So for the slides themselves, it's you're going to correct the folks who say no. Um, but you want to create a carrot and a stick, right? Here are the benefits to our org and the benefits to your team. Here are the days where we're going to start deprecating the technology you use, or you are not going to be able to just call up a platform over and over and over again every time you need to deploy, right? This is going to be on you to figure out by X date. Similarly, with new tasks and responsibilities, don't need to happen all at once, right? Teach, practice, and roll out. Document, 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 right? Everything is written down. Especially for platform teams who are used to living in these technologies, it is easy to forget how little other folks might understand these technologies. The clearer the documents are, the better. And finally, automate and integrate, right? Anything, we'll talk about that more in a second, but anything you can automate, anything you can push to say, just hit this button, anything you can build into your existing workflows is better. I know this point extremely well in my professional life. Devs are hard customers. They are used to doing things their own way, used to doing things a particular way, and used to being able to be creative, to work around whatever you say to solve the problem the way they want to solve it. So the better experience you can give, the better it will be. So before I hand off to Ty, I'm going to talk about the three things that ops level or any developer portal can do to help. And I frame this as three questions we can help your teams answer. What does my team own? Right? I like to think about onboarding a new developer onto my team, right? We've just hired someone or we've gone through a reorg. What is my team actually responsible for? What does it mean to own something? Right? How do I maintain the stuff that I own? How do I do the work of ownership day in, day out as part of my regular work? And finally, I have these new parts of my job. I have new technology I have to do. How do I actually do it? Where do I find the tasks? How do I spin up new services? How do I find the documentation? So that's how developer portals can actually help you achieve these goals. And with that in mind, I'm going to throw this over to Ty to talk about an actual demo of how ops levels product approaches and can help solve these. So Ty, over to you.
Awesome. I will share my screen. All right, perfect. So I'm going to do this demo in two different parts. The first part is we're going to focus on more the operational benefit and how do you actually start to build out a service catalog. So what we're looking at here is a bunch of microservices that we're tracking within the service catalog portion of ops level. And the key differentiator here is, well, how do we start to build this out? Because for a lot of our customers prior to ops level, this was a very manual process. It was either a bunch of Notion wikis or Confluence wikis or spreadsheets, or maybe it was a bunch of YAML files in a central repository that they had to manually create. And this is a challenge for a lot of our customers that come to ops level. So if I navigate to this whole concept of detected services, we've built out what we call a catalog engine. And really, the purpose behind having a catalog engine is trying to automate the building of your service catalog through integrations as quickly as possible. So what we're looking at here is if I just expand one of these records, I start to see that a bunch of different integrations like GitHub and Datadog and PagerDuty, all of these will start to drive what we offer as recommendations to our customers, and they'll help as signals to building out what the service catalog should look like. So this is one area where we automate a lot of this initial discovery, and we want to get away from as much of the manual work as possible. For some of our customers, the discovery in itself is a huge exercise because in some instances, I've seen customers say, oh, we think we have 300 microservices. And then they hook up all their different tools, and now they have 500 recommendations that they weren't aware of. So being able to discover a lot of these orphan services and do this as automated as possible is really where the journey starts for ownership. Now, the other piece here is aside from discovering the services, we're also going to give inferences on, well, based off of these different integrations like GitHub and the contributors to this repository, who actually owns this service? And can we offer that as a recommendation? So if I highlight this ownership field here, you'll notice that Opsa was actually suggesting these owners based on the contributors in GitHub. And this is huge in terms of automating, well, if we want to figure out who owns something, how do we suggest that automatically and then send this out as notifications to those teams so they can come into ops level and action their services that we think they own? So that's what we're looking at here from an inferences perspective. And then what this allows ops level to do is if I open my detected services panel, it allows us to send out notifications to these suggested owners and drive all that traffic into ops level and then have them start to either accept these new services, merge these services to something that already exists, or they can also reassign it to another team if maybe there's been a recent reorg and some of this needs to be updated. So the catalog engine for our customers really drives a lot of value in terms of building out that initial catalog. And then later down the line, if some customers want to lock down all this information and config as code, they can go down the YAML route later in the journey. But at least they don't have to initially do everything manually from a YAML perspective or a Confluence Wiki perspective or spreadsheets in general. So that's really the first benefit. It's really that operational gain of trying to automate the building of your catalog. Now, the second benefit, and Ezra talked to this a little bit, was, well, what does my team own? What is the benefit to the individual developer? And that benefit comes across it in many different ways. The first way is the dashboard. The dashboard is built out for your developers to have a snapshot into let's cut as much of the noise out as possible and let's only focus on what I as a developer own based on what team I'm a part of. So if I navigate to my dashboard, these dashboards are actually customized based off of what team you're a part of. And I can now start to see, well, from an ownership perspective, I can highlight all the services that I own. I can highlight the infrastructure and the repositories that I own and that my team owns. And I can get a very quick snapshot into, well, how are my services doing? Are they mature services? Are they production ready? Is there any work involved that I need to be doing in order to make this more production ready? And I can now start to find information quickly. So Ezra gave us some good metrics around, well, there's about 3,000 hours a year spent just finding information. So making all that information easily accessible from documentation to tools to deploy information is really a goal of ops level and centralizing all that critical information. So if I jump into one of these services that I own as part of this order management team, such as my shopping cart service, I can now have all that information readily available. So for different use cases like incidents, if there's an incident and I need to figure out, well, how does this incident impact other services? I can go to my dependencies and I can look at my service dependency graph and I can see all those upstream, those downstream impacts to other services. And I can see, well, okay, my shopping cart service is green. It looks like my alert sources from PagerDuty and Datadog and other tools notify me that there aren't any active incidents. But if there were, I would be able to find that information really quickly. So service dependencies is one area that we help a lot of our customers. Being able to additionally attach different alert sources from your tools, such as PagerDuty, Datadog, Opsgenie, and New Relic, is also another area of trying to centralize as much information as possible around incident response and being able to drive down MTTR and other use cases around resolving incidents. Another area for our customers is being able to centralize documentation. So can I, if I'm onboarding as a new developer, or even if I'm just switching teams, can I find documentation easily? Can I find all my tech docs, my README files? Can I find all my API documentation? Do I know what endpoints are available and how to interact with different microservices? All that information is now indexed, it's searchable, it's easy to find, And we're providing a lot of value in terms of giving time back to developers when they need to find this type of information. And then the last piece that I really want to cover here too is, well, from an ownership perspective, what does it mean to have a healthy and mature service? Do we know what initiatives we're running against? Do we know what production readiness even means? What standards we have to adhere to? And all of that information is provided in this whole concept of service maturity for ops level. So being able to come in here as a developer, look at my microservice, head to a maturity report, and understand, well, my service is currently at a bronze level, and the reason it's at a bronze level is because we're failing these silver checks that are provided as a production readiness checklist from a central team like my platform team or my SRE team or the security team. We're allowing those teams to now dictate, well, what are these best practices? What are these standards? What are these production readiness checklists that we should now adhere to as a developer? And it's now really easy to figure out how my services are doing and how to get to that next level moving forward as well. So if we just expand one of these bronze categories here, we can see all the different checks that make up having a bronze, a minimal production ready service, such as making sure that ownership is defined. Ownership is a big topic that we're discussing today, and you can actually use service maturity checks to drive this initiative forward and starting to define that ownership. You can also use it for many other things, like making sure that documentation is available, making sure that you're bringing in results from different security scanning tools. But the key here to understand is it's very easy now for developers to understand what it means to be production readiness and to find that information and how to move forward in that journey of ownership as well. So that's what I wanted to cover in the demo. The demo was pretty short. It was intended to be around 10 minutes to give high level overview of, well, what are some of these challenges that people are trying to solve, some of the use cases around onboarding new engineers, switching teams, and making information easily accessible, and what it means to own a service and have all the information readily available. But as a member of the pre-sales team, it's something that we love talking about. So if there's anyone wants a deeper dive demo, we're always happy to do that as well. But I'll turn it back to Ezra.
Okay, so that's all the sort of structured stuff. I think we're going to now turn to Q&A. So we have 2 questions here. There are other folks who have more questions. Do feel free to drop those in as well. So Ty, I think we can start answering these questions. So I'll read the first one out. In your experience, how do your customers justify the time/money investment of a dev portal? It looks great. We've really struggled to get new tooling implemented. Ty, want to take this one? Should I?
I'll give you the first pass. I'll
All right,
add
yeah,
on.
sounds good. I work post sale usually, so customers have already answered this question by the time they come to me. Yeah, and the first thing is the time that you're spending already is a hidden cost in your org, right? So ops level itself is a cost you can see, right? Like we're going to charge you X number of dollars per year. We're going to help you onboard as quickly as we can, but there is an implementation setup time. The hidden cost is how many spreadsheets exist today at your org, right? How many spreadsheets are there where the first column is the name of the team, the second column is the thing that team owns, right? And then the third column is some piece of data about this thing. And how many hours do you folks spend, right? Like building those spreadsheets, the time over time over time. The other part of the justification our customers often use is the thinking around. I showed some of these metrics earlier. My own presentation is how much faster could we deploy if? How much faster could we work through our roadmap if we didn't need to constantly look for information? If we knew where we stood around production readiness? If we had a way to have these actions go out? And so when you're looking at a big old roadmap or a set of budget and you're trying to think, how can we best maximize this budget to help us build and ship code? I don't know if ops level is the top of that list, right, or an IDP, but somewhere on that list hopefully is, well, what if we found the information we need? What if we could onboard new developers this much faster? What if we had this many fewer incidents? That would go a long way in how a lot of our customers think about this problem of this is frustrating and annoying. I don't want to do this. So anyway, that's my like high level. This is the general thing. I think if you want to chat with Ty and team, they probably have a different or longer answer on ROI model, but that's how I think often customers think about their goals and the ROI here.
Yeah, and I will say, just to add on a little bit, I will say it's different for every customer. It's really dependent on the use cases and KPIs that they're trying to drive. So finding information quicker for most companies, it's often very qualitative. Most companies don't do a survey that says, "Oh, how much faster is it now to find information?" So it really depends on, well, is the metric MTTR, for example, or developer productivity, and then depending on those use cases, we can always talk about, well, how does ops level solve those particular problems? But it's usually dependent and different from customer to customer for the most part.
Okay, cool. Another question here. We've gone through a number of acquisitions. And while our teams generally own their own code, another part of our company does not. The recommendations are working with mixed models of development. Yeah, so I can take this one. The short answer is yes, we do. Sometimes the impetus behind coming to our product is that everything was neat and clean and organized and well structured, and then there was a merger, then there was an acquisition, and now they live in chaos, right? Like everything is just messed up, and so they're trying to get some level of order, right, in terms of what actually exists, where does it stand, what technology does it run. um so that is definitely an experience we've had in terms of the mixed like ownership model, right? Our teams work in the modern way of building and shipping. They're working on bare metal with their like waterfall twice annual release cycles. Like, what do we do? And we've seen generally two approaches. One approach is you and what will determine the approach, I think, is how quickly you want to move that other team to your approach, right? And some company or customers say like live and let live. We'll get to them when we can. And then what ops level essentially becomes is for our teams, it looks like this. For those other teams, it looks very different, right? Our services have all sorts of things flushed out within them. Their services don't. And the ability of ops level to filter, to tag, to set up a property allows you to have that bifurcation within the product itself, right? These checks apply to our services, those checks apply to theirs. Other companies who take a faster approach to change management in this sort of mixed model will use ops level to help those teams from that other company. So question and asker, I'm right, the other company that ships a lot slower, understand what it is that our standard is. Like we at our company ships code this way. This is what we expect from you as well. And so that is often through a series of checks. That's through a series of webinars and talks, right? That's through a series of they can look inside and see what exists and try to understand what that looks like, right? Ops level becomes the way of working through this. My general thought on this is if your company has a really well structured, really well organized, everything is exactly where it should be, everything's named the way you want it to be, everyone does the engineering, no one ever takes on engineering debt, right? Your liability is where it should be. You probably don't need our product, right? Like, sounds like things are going really well and you probably don't need this. That's not true for most of our customers. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. So I think we can call this here, unless I'll give folks another 20 seconds if they want to add any their final questions or anything like that. But if not, we can probably call this here. So thanks so much for coming. I hope this was interesting, enjoyable, informative. If you do want to learn more about ops level, Ty, what should they do?
They should reach out to us and schedule a demo. Happy to do a demo, deeper dive, longer demo, and really just dive into the particular problems that you're looking to solve at your organization and how we can potentially help.
Awesome. Yeah. So opslevel.com probably is a good place to go, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much, everyone. I appreciate your time.